I don't really want to say it, but so far, knock on wood, freaking wood, we've been having a good day. Look at this. That's an issue with my truck, but what happens when you have a 16-year-old truck? What are we doing today? Dad's out seeding. I'm treating peas right now, so we got Carver peas, which are yellow. They're being treated with this starter. This starter actually doesn't have any color. It's just a liquid fertilizer, essentially. But the dealer puts in some pink for us, so we can see. That mini keg there, it's supposed to do like 550-ish bushels. So you kind of got to do some math behind it. But my bees are loud. But as you can see, they come out a little bit pink. I shouldn't have done that because it's so wet. We really should be using a conveyor to treat them, but we don't have one. So here's what happened the other day after we did all the screwing around is I was down in the tank, and you go in that big hatch. We emptied all the peas out, and what our problem was is that this guy was sitting like that. So you do a quick look, you don't really notice anything, but it's not locked in. So when I was coming up the ladder, you could see light underneath it. That's that silly little mistake. I'm not saying it was Dad. I'm not saying it was me, because we're not really sure. We were both there. And I'm not really trying to blame anything. It was both of us were up here, and both of us were came up after the fact. Both of us were up here when we were filling. And I opened it because I thought we were going to fill into there, and Dad's like, we'll just do a little bit to make sure the calibration's on. I think he closed it, but we both came up and looked, and neither of us caught it. Because usually if you're having problems, you forget to do this, and it ends up just floating that little bit. So those are all locked in, and we didn't have problems afterwards. The only problem we're having is that shank assist. All right, today, well, last night I started, but today I'm rolling our first, about a half section of peas that was sown to level off the ground and pound any rocks into the ground. Any big ones I'll still have to come out and pick, but the reason that we do that is, number one, to pound the rocks into the ground, because peas have a tendency to grow up and then they get top heavy and they flatten out. So we have to go along with our flex headers, which I'm kind of exaggerating, but the ends walk up and down and it floats along the ground like this far off the ground. So you don't want any loose rocks. So anything that's small, like grapefruit size, whatever, that can get pounded into the ground. Anything bigger will get picked afterwards, because you're cutting so low to the ground that I'm trying to do this without, I forgot my phone mount, but you end up with peaks like that when we seed, and packing it just flattens off the top couple of inches to also give you the ability to get really low to the ground with the seeder, with the header on the combine. The flex headers are fantastic because it takes a lot of the stress off. I've done peas with a rigid header, and on a place like this, it's not fun because you might be a couple inches off the ground on one side and you might be a couple feet off the ground on the other. Not necessarily here, but if we were going sideways on this little run. And the flex header maintains a fairly constant height along the entire thing because it's got, I think, 7 inches of play each way on the end of each wing. 7 or 10? I think 7. I think it's 10 on the 45s, but we run 35. Might even be more. But Dad, you can see, is over there seeding our second field of peas. With any luck, we'll be done that today. But we've got a bearing on the way out on our meter. Excuse me. We elected not to change them this year. We pulled them out. They were all running good. Usually we change them every year. Actually, the one that's going was the one we thought was probably in the best condition. So it's just weird. Well, and this thing's running against fertilizer all day, and fertilizer will just eat everything up. When we're changing out those bearings, we're supposed to be able to shut the, there's a little plate that you can put down above your meters, and we can't. They've never been moved. They're rock hard. So Dad's trying, hopefully he can get that fertilizer tank all seeded out, and then we don't have to dump any fertilizer back into the truck. Not a big deal. It's just a bit of a hassle, and it's kind of awkward and slow. So if he gets that seeded out, I will run over and we'll yank the meter out and we'll run it back to the farm. It's not long. It's probably a 20-minute job to change those bearings over, as long as everything comes off the shaft easy. If I have to cut it, well, that's a different story. It started acting up yesterday around supper. Dad said, he's like, yeah, it just won't start right, or it'll stop midway. And we got out there and we gave it a shot of grease and we worked it with a wrench, and all of a sudden it popped free. And we're like, well, it's either the seal's gone and it's full of fertilizer, or a bad ball. I think the seal's gone. They're not cheap bearings, but it's very expensive to have a mistake like not putting fertilizer down. So I wouldn't say it's critical, especially now when my dad and my uncles started growing peas. They never put fertilizer at all, because peas will actually draw nitrogen in from the air, and they don't use a ton of other nutrients. Like, we only put 65 pounds of fertilizer down, and our blend's like 929. So, and lots of lots of phos. So if we put 65 pounds down, 29% of that is phos. Only 9% is nitrogen, so you're talking like only 7 pounds. And we put a little bit of starter fertilizer on the seed just to give it that little extra energy, just explode out of the ground. I did it on my canola last year, and I found it emerged like 2 days earlier than the other stuff. And like, especially with the canola, it got past the really delicate stage where gotta make a corner. So when I put starter fertilizer on the canola last year, I said I feel like it popped through a day or two earlier, and like when canola first comes through, it looks like just little 4-leaf clovers, really small and dainty. And then I think they call it cotyledon. And then it gets to it's really thin, really delicate crop at that point. And I found with the starter fertilizer, it shot through that phase and then it goes to the point where it looks kind of like baby spinach leaves. Once it gets to the baby spinach leaf, it's the stage, we'll call it. It's a little tougher. Like, it can take a frost or a cold night a lot better, and the flea beetles tend to not like it. So we run Prosper, Lumiderm, Evergoal, whatever it's called, on all of our Invigor canola, and it's a seed coated fungicide and insecticide, and that keeps the cutworms out, and it keeps the flea beetles. It's supposed to keep the flea beetles off for 30 days after seeding. Now, the problem is that the flea beetles still need to eat some of the plant to get that insecticide in them, and then they die. So once it gets to that thicker leaf, so if you can blow through that really delicate phase, you're going to have less flea beetle damage. And the healthier your plant is, the more energy it can absorb, the more stuff it can tolerate. All that should convert into either, well, both better disease resistance, such as Sclerotinia and clubroot, well, not necessarily clubroot, but also should translate into better yields. So we've never done starter fertilizer on peas before, but we're doing it in hopes that it just pops through a little better. And they had a pretty good deal on it this year, so we decided to really go for it. We are still going to do some check strips on the Climate Field View. The other thing I like about the idea of putting starter on the peas is that the peas can crack. We don't have a conveyor we have a conveyor on the seeder, but we don't have a conveyor for handling peas in the yard. That's probably a purchase that's going to happen this year. But so every time you put them through an auger, you risk cracking them, and once they're cracked, they won't grow. So if you put a little bit of liquid on them, they seem to hold up. They soften up just a tiny bit, and they tend to have a little better survivability. So we're kind of double dipping on that. The price of starter was good. The price of every other fertilizer has kind of gone up significantly. So we're trying to manipulate that a little bit, or offset that a hair.